Thank you. Let's check in with the world's population to see how many people we've added to this planet in 24 hours. Okay, so go ahead and write this number down at 7:40 a.m. on 10/21/2020. Again, we'll kind of round it off to 7,691,684,800. Use 800 as the last three digits. And now, somebody please grab a calculator and get us how many people have been added. Subtract today's number, no, subtract yesterday's number from today's number. So you kind of have it backwards on your page, but that's okay. You can do math. What you got, Chris?
200,838,838.
200 million? Is that right? Seems big. 3 million? 200. Okay. Somebody else want to check that? Jane, you got it?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
It's 283,700,000.
Oh, but he was in the right ballpark. 283.
Oh,
1,000?
1,000.
That makes more sense. Okay. Seems more reasonable. Still seems like a lot. I mean, that's more than 250,000 people in 24 hours, not just being born, but excess from subtracting deaths from births. It's a lot. So I think the question we answered today is, how did that happen? Go ahead and write that number down, by the way. That many people in 24 hours. And here we are in chapter 6, where we shift from just looking at ecosystems on their own to looking at humans and our presence in the biosphere. And if you're studying humans in the biosphere, the first thing to acknowledge is simply that, man, there's a lot of us. And to kind of investigate how that happened and where we are in that population curve. So, quick tour of humans' history in the biosphere. First 200,000 years of our existence as a species, not a whole lot of change. This is the part where you write. What are we doing for that 200,000 years? How are we making our living, Tristan? Cavemen, I like it. What did cavemen do? Eat, sleep, and what? Fight. Oh, okay. But like, how do you get food? Hunting, good. How else? Gathering, hunter-gatherers, yeah. And cavemen's good, although hunter-gatherers often have to be a little more mobile. Maybe they find different caves in different places, but they're definitely got to be nomadic. Why? Why do hunter-gatherers have to be nomadic? Why do they have to move from place to place, Brady?
Right.
Huh? Prey. What do you mean? What about them? Okay. So they got to move out so that they don't know where they live? No. What are they hunting? Yeah, most of the animals that are easy to kill and have lots of meat are not your top predators. Most of those animals are herd animals, and the herds move from place to place, so you follow the herds. Ooh, I like that. They killed a lot of animals in the first places they lived, so they had to move. That's absolutely, in fact, that's the very next thing. We were actually, turns out, pretty good at hunting. And so it looks like they're finding more and more fossilized bone pits with like spear marks on them that say that humans might have been the driver of the extinction of a bunch of the big mammals around 12,000 years ago. We were pretty good at hunting. You also got to move if you're just a gatherer, right? If you're eating plants, you kind of have to follow the seasons, or the growing seasons at least, of different kinds of plants that you know that are edible. So it's a absolutely necessary lifestyle, being nomadic, moving around. You see my new microphone? I just installed it today. It's right there. Fancy microphone. And I'm like, okay, so how do I hook it up? And they're like, oh, IT has to come in. They didn't order the right parts. They got to put in like 2 more parts, and that's going to come in a couple weeks, and then maybe it'll work. Maybe. So remote, maybe it'll sound better soon. I don't know. Yeah. So then something changed. Something big changed. What was it? Not yet. No, we're not there yet. We'll get there. You're absolutely right. That's coming. Abby? No, that's way before. That's way before. We weren't around for that. That's the one that cooked the dinosaurs. Farming. Like some super genius figured out, hey, we like this plant, right? We like to eat this plant. This plant makes these things called seeds. I don't know what they called them back then. And it turns out the seeds will last the winter. So if you take the seeds from the plant and then plant them in the spring, oh my God, you can grow the food wherever you want. Like we can stop moving around and just grow the food right here and keep taking the seeds from the plants and keep planting the plants here, and it'll totally work. And that was the first thing to start to contribute to the lowering of the death rates. Because that's what moves when population goes exponential. It's not that the birth rates increase. Birth rates tend to stay pretty constant. It's that death rates go down. And so the first lower of death rates is agriculture. Agriculture is what allows civilization as we know it to form, because now they can stay in one place. Now we can have cities and towns. Domesticated animals follow soon after that. Somebody goes, hey, instead of like following these herds around, these animals are really dumb. And they like to follow each other. So all we need is like a fence. And we get like 2 animals of that animal we like to eat, and we make sure it's a boy animal and a girl animal, and you put them in the fence and they make more animals. Ah! Free meat. So that was huge. Then there's some advances between the 14 and 1700s in agricultural technology, things like low tech you would think of, like moving water to the fields rather than letting the rain do all the work. Metal plows, things like that. So agriculture is a big one. One of the big 3 things that lowers our death rates. The other 2, I kind of go in chronological order, but I want to skip to something in agriculture in the 1950s, because in the 1950s, scientists basically realized, hey, this is what's happening. We are on this upward trend of the exponential curve, and we don't know what the Earth's carrying capacity for people is, so we got to get to work. So these agricultural scientists, and we call it the green revolution. But it's not green like you think of now, like ecological. It's green just because it was agriculture, it was plants. And so what happened is basically agricultural scientists got together and genetically engineered new strains of crops that would put out more food, like corn that you can grow closer together and has more ears per plant to feed more people. Basically coming up with almost like super crops of each food variety crop that we have in a technique that we call monoculture, which we'll talk about soon. Monoculture is planting genetically identical crops. So like when you look at a field of corn, which there's plenty of around here, what you're actually looking at is thousands and thousands of identical twins. They're all the genetic strain of corn that puts out the most food we could engineer, and they're all genetically identical. Knowing what you know about ecology from the last unit, what's a little scary about monoculture? What's a little dangerous about planting identical twins on hundreds of square miles? Brady? What's that word? No diversity. Zero diversity. Why is that scary?
Because if a new predator or like something that would eat the crops came along and like were to affect the population, it would affect it a lot more than if there was diversity.
So we speak in terms of disturbance, right? You talk about something coming along and eating the crops.
Or
But
like something infecting it.
Infecting it is exactly that's probably the biggest worry. What if there's some, virus or bacterium, and those things do infect plants, by the way, or fungus, that's really good at killing that one perfect corn strain? What happens? They're all gone, right? No diversity means that if one plant is vulnerable to whatever comes along, all of them are. So it's scary. We'll talk more about that later, but I'm glad you remember that. Okay, the other big two. Industrial revolution and healthcare. So agriculture, industrial revolution, and healthcare, those are definitely kind of the death rate lowerers. Bet you didn't think you were going to see the industrial revolution here. I don't know why, but the industrial revolution is one of those things that's really hard for students to explain. Somebody want to give it a shot?
Like a quick explanation.
Like you could do it in 2 words.
Okay. Bunch of dudes made machines, and then from there, everybody started working in factories and migrating towards the city.
Interesting. Bunch of dudes made machines, factories, people lived in cities. Okay. Kind of missing the main point though. Landon, we got? Definitely increased productivity. That is true. How?
2-word cities industrialized, but but they made a lot of new I don't know how to describe things to do other things easier, to make farming easier, to make just life easier, to where they don't have to go out and hunt things. They have machines that will do that now. They have new guns.
Ooh, guns. Okay.
New guns.
Hyperventilating. It's okay. This is hard. I'm going to try and make it easy because you're smarter now than when the first time you learned Industrial Revolution. I want you to picture shoes. You can do this with anything, whatever product you want. But shoes used to be made in a shoe shop. A cobbler would make shoes, right? And he'd make 1 pair at a time, and he'd sell them out of his little shop. What does the Industrial Revolution do? Chris? How? Assembly lines are definitely part of this.
a lot of people are doing like certain jobs to where, like that one job, then the other person does the other job. And
Yes.
then eventually-
So the 2-word explanation I would give is mass production. Instead of one guy making one product, you got a bunch of people. One of them's doing the little eyelets for the laces. One of them's doing the part of the sole. The other one's doing the other part of the sole. It's a bunch of people working together in usually a factory, yeah. But the point is they're making tons of stuff using more manpower rather than just one thing at a time using one person. That's the basic idea. And what it meant was more stuff for everybody. You're absolutely right. More stuff, which means lower death rates. Because you can apply it to anything, including food, mass production of food, right? Good. And then healthcare, which is a fairly recent development, that it's been anything but, leeches and evil spirits and phlegm and bile. But, it really did. Once useful things like antibiotics and sterile technique and hand washing and vaccines come out, then death rates really start to fall. So that's the point at which, because birth rates aren't changing, they're still high, the population is now growing exponentially. And so the study of that upshoot, the study of human populations and how they grow, actually has its own branch of ecology. It's called demography. I'm going to give you a graph. Not exactly. It's like a heat map almost. And I want you to just stare at it for a little bit and tell me what jumps out at you. Tell me what jumps out at you about this graph. I'll give you a couple minutes to look at it. There it is. Obviously, old data. Hasn't changed a whole lot, though, since then. What jumps out at you, Landon?
In like the third world countries, there's more birth rates.
In third world countries, there's more birth rates. Third world is one of those weird terms. It's kind of code for something. I think we talked about it before. What does third world really mean?
Kind of like they haven't industrialized as much as.
Industrialized is another code word. Not as well off is, yeah. These are countries with high poverty levels, almost across the board. The red countries, which have the highest birth rates, are the countries with the least wealth in the hands of their people, which is interesting. That's an interesting trend. Yeah.
Don't a lot of them have more kids, so they can put more kids to work so that they can bring more?
So yeah, we can talk about the reasons that in poorer countries birth rates are higher. We can talk about the reasons that in wealthier, those green and black countries are the richest countries in the world, by the way. Brady?
So it says 3 to 3.5.
Okay, I can make this easy. And no, Greenland's not hiding their babies. They just maybe couldn't get data from them or something. No, so it's called an average, right? So if 10 women have 9 kids, what's the average per woman? I said 10 babies have 9 kids.
No, you said 10 women.
Good. I'm glad I spoke correctly. 10 women have 9 kids. The birth rate per woman is 0.9. That's how averages work. So that's why. So, yeah, this is demography we're talking about. So, what do you think it is about being poor that tends to make increased birth rates? Maybe. What else? Not a lot.
It's to help with like the work.
So that's what Riley was saying too. I think that there is, in countries especially with strong family units, it can be more economical if you have more offspring for them to be able to work. If they're sending money back home and they're all sort of pooling their resources, that can really work. And so having more hands to work can be an advantage. What else? You're 2 for 2, Riley. Birth control's an issue because birth control requires 2 things. What are they? Money, for sure. It costs money. It's not free. But what's the other thing you need to use birth control? It would be money. Yeah, it comes with money too. But I would argue that one of the things that wealthier countries have over poorer countries is education. You got to know about birth control and you got to know how to use it, right? And that comes with education, which explains a lot. Education explains a lot. If a country doesn't have the infrastructure to maintain a good public education system, a lot of problems come with that, and overpopulation is part of that. Anyway, that's a class in itself, I think. But this phenomenon where the wealthier countries, at this point, population growth has really declined. Hey, stay with us. We're almost there. I know. Actually has a name. That change is so important that they call it the demographic transition. And I think I'm going to leave it there. We will talk more about the demographic transition tomorrow because I want to give you a head start on your assignment today. Rather than just do a typical guided reading for chapter 6, because chapter 6 is kind of a laundry list of environmental problems, which can get a little depressing. I will help as much as I can with as many bright spots as I can, but that's just kind of how this chapter is. The assignment for this chapter is called How Bad Is It Really? And it's simply a list of the 10 environmental problems addressed in chapter 6. Your job for each of those problems, and please follow instructions, is to explain 3 things. And feel free to bullet them and not use complete sentences, but be thorough. The causes of the problem, the effects, the harmful effects of the problem, and the potential solutions to the problem. All of that you should be able to get from chapter 6. Got it? All right, good. While you're at it, if you would get out